I suppose I wonder, where do you stop being you as an individual and where do you become simply a member of your species? For example, say you're at a football or baseball game and a flock of birds flies over the stadium and the crowd looks up at the flock of birds and says, oh, it's just a flock of birds. And then the birds look down at the people and say, oh, it's just a flock of people. Well, what makes any one individual person different from any other individual? The list of things really isn't very long when you think about it. Religion, family, history, geography, politics, all the things that used to count don't exist anymore, or else they've mutated. Identity's become an entirely fluid issue now.
Douglas Copeland, let's start at the beginning. When's your birthday? When and where did you begin?
I began on December 30th, 1961, on a Canadian NATO base in West Germany.
Do you consider yourself a citizen of the late 20th century?
Yes.
Douglas, let's talk about people, specifically the types of people our culture is creating at this point in history. Our minds, our bodies, our souls. Let's discuss the idea of not having a life, of being biologically alive, but not having a life.
Well, what is a life? Suddenly it's become this burning question. I mean, it's not something that anyone ever expected to have to ask. Suddenly we have to articulate what life is, and it's almost absurd, yet necessary at the same time. Suddenly in the last 10 to 15 years, people have just stopped having lives. People who used to have lives now don't.
Cut.
But if you were to travel back in time, even 20 years, and you said to someone, hey, look at Larry. Larry doesn't have a life. That person would give you a blank stare and say, what are you talking about? Of course Larry he's alive, he's breathing, he's got a pulse. Of course he's living. What are you talking about? But now, I mean, not having a life is so common, it's almost become the norm.
But what caused that change? Was it the deluge of information technology that was supposed to liberate us and give us more of a life?
Well, yes, but first you have to get super basic. You have to think about time. You have to consider the way you perceive time's flow. The split between being biologically alive and having a life has to do with the way you perceive time and the way you perceive your information environment. I think people used to think that time was a constant, like gravity or the speed of light, but as it turns out, it's entirely relative. It used to be that if a person was alive for 71.3 years, they got to experience all 71.3 years of life. Now people aren't experiencing their 71.3 years of life anymore, and I think they're maybe freaking out. I wonder if people feel as if they're drowning somehow. We live in a consumer culture. Maybe it's a value for your money thing, but people just aren't getting their year's worth of year anymore.
Why not?
We've increased the information density in our culture to the point where our perception of time is now all screwy. Here's a minor example I always use. I might be reading a People magazine article about Bert and Lonnie's breakup, and in the process I'll burn up 1,484,362 brain cells. These are cells that might have been put toward finding a solution for world peace, or maybe just meditating on a twig the way people used to before TV and stuff. But instead, these are cells that got used up wondering about Bert's hair.
But time, you said that technology has, well, mutated time in a way. How?
Well, I think people will remember the late 20th century as a place obsessed with efficiency, a place where people cram more and more productivity into fewer time slots, a place where humans invented all these inventions to speed up the flow of information, FedEx, Prozac, microwave ovens, fax machines, but then it all backfired.
Backfired?
Technology gives you more time only up until a certain point, and then time starts vanishing at this fantastic rate, like a car running out of gas. I used to have this fantasy that I'd go into a coma for 1 year. When I came out of the coma, I'd have a year's worth of magazines and pop culture to catch up on. It would be like information crack and really fun, but now every day is like waking up after a year of having been in a coma.
Okay, here's a question, Douglas. How is the typical person of today different from the typical person of, say, 200 years ago?
200 years ago, people assumed that life would never change from year to year, the way birds and animals see time as something eternal. Modern people see tomorrow as this place that will be totally and utterly different from today, with new hairdos and clothes and architecture and ideas and weather.
Do you believe in randomness?
No, if something seems random, it means you're standing too close to a very large pattern, and you can't see the pattern because you're too close to it.
Are you middle class?
Yeah.
All right. Name the two dominant activities of life 20 years from now.
Going shopping and going to jail.
Douglas, where does your sense of self come from? Who is the you of you?
You mean, where do I locate my sense of being, my sense of who I am now?
Yes.
Okay, well, here's an exercise. Ask yourself, am I trapped being myself forever? Am I ever going to change? Well, what if I took a stick of dynamite and put it inside you and blew you up like a cartoon Sylvester the Cat? You know the shot that comes after where there's like a tail walking around picking up like a leg and like reassembling. Sylvester builds himself back up again. Well, what if you didn't have to be you? What if you could be anyone you wanted to? Would you be young or old or rich or poor or black or white, or where would you live on Earth, or when would you be? Who would you be? How would you reassemble yourself if you didn't have to be you?